Rarity woke the next morning suddenly, as if she had been slapped in the face. The room was cold, and she could barely see it from beneath the heavy blanket she had buried herself under. She couldn't remember when she finally fell asleep, but the memory of what she had seen and done returned to her in the instant of her eyes were open. For a moment she didn't move. She hardly dared to breathe, which she felt watchfulness all around her. A wave of pain washed over her chest as the irrational guilt and dread from the nightmare returned worse than ever. She pulled in a shaky breath as she held back a sudden sob. In her mind she could already see the stitch. Every frayed fiber in her thread she had welded it passed through the pale lips and came away red. When she couldn't stand it anymore, she pushed the covers away and slowly stood up, carefully examining the room around her. A weak orange-red sun was rising, fleeably cutting through the heavy clouds that worked to hide it. The light painted in the room in fiery shades of copper and cast along deformed shadows that seemed to stretch out towards her like long, thin limbs. To get out of bed had it all taken all of her strength. She could barely imagine walking down the dark steps into the dim showroom, where her sewing table waited and the desk of a judge. The mirrors waited for her, too, along with whatever they might have reflected back at her. Would she even be able to recognize herself if she were to look in one, or would she see someone who was capable of suffocating a fool? She swallowed and walked reluctantly to the door. She brought the key over from her nightstand, fitted into the lock, and gently turned it. She thought she could hear the heavy click echo several times down the hall into the rooms below. She eased the door gently open and peered out into the hallway. It was dark, narrow, and empty. From somewhere below, something made a metallic squeak, followed by a clack, sending Rarity's heart racing painfully and almost causing her to slam the door and flee back into her bed. The mail slot, she thought, forcing her to breathe through her nose. It's just the mail slot. Taking another long breath, she made herself walk down the hall. The sunlight's red glow was just visible around to the bend of the stairs, and for a moment she imagined wildly that she had left the lamps on and set the lower floor on fire. But there were no flames when she descended down the stairs and walked into the main room. Everything was perfectly still and quiet. Her eyes darted around, looking for anything out of the ordinary or out of place. Nothing seemed to amiss. Even so, she was struck with the impression that in her home, her possessions had somehow been violated, as if it were came home after a long trip and found her belongings rifted throughout the strewn about. Then she heard something scrambling into hiding where it could wait for her. She couldn't see the left mirror on the DOS and was overcome with desire to cover it with something before she could come into its field of view. Well, why not? She snagged bits of discarded fabric lying around in the room with magic. In a few moments, she had hidden all the mirrors around the DOS and the ones above the vanities, even the one she had broken, and never bothered to clean it up. It did nothing to ease the tension she wore, or she could taste in the air. It almost seemed bitter, like stringent strain of something left over from a bad chemistry experiment. But she could at least bear to walk into the room now. I'll go to the library, she thought. Miss Dog-Ear will know where to find the books on the strange lingering magics. She'll be able to help. There's not much I can tell her, but she won't ask if she sees. I don't want to talk. I can figure this out. As she approached the door, she saw the ivory sheets of Ponyville Express splayed out on the carpet, narrow black type across the surface, and yanked the sullen light. Atop the huge gaping slab letters of the headline seemed to leap out at her, and she felt her heart sink to her stomach in abject horror. Ms. Dog-Ear was found to have passed away in her home Monday morning when concerned patrons were unable to access the library. The cause of death is currently believed by exasperation by gas poisoning. Upon investigation, it was found that one of the gas valves for the library's lighting system was left practically open, without being ignited. It is believed that Ms. Dog-Ear, a mayor who just recently celebrated her 64th birthday, forgot to check her lamps thoroughly before retiring for the night, as she was found in her bed with no signs of struggle or other suspicious evidence. It's a real tragedy, 5-alarm chief of Ponyville Fire Authority told the Express. The old gal was getting up there, so it's easy to see her start to forget a little things like this, and like checking the lamps. Gas safety is something every pony has to take seriously. As always, we urge every pony to make sure their lighting systems were well maintained too, and as always check your valves before going to bed. The incident has prompted many residents, most notably real estate agent Minimum Mortgage and businesses magnate Filthy Rich, to demand the mandatory introduction of the follow ordinance to Ponyville's gas systems in hopes of preventing future poisoning accidents. The article was printed alongside a smudgy photograph of Miss Dog-Ear standing and smiling in front of the library tree. Rarity sat down hard and let the paper fall to the floor. She couldn't imagine Miss Dog-Ear suddenly gone forever. She had been the library's guardian for as long as many Ponyville residents had been alive. She was a fixture, unmovable object. To think of her being gone was unbelievable, as the library tree itself vanishing. Another realization struck her. She snatched up the papers again, scanning through the dark lines. Her last hopes were finally crushed when she found the information she sought. The Ponyville Library will be closed until further notice. No suitable staff has yet been located to maintain the collection. We will announce when the information becomes visible about the library's reopening. Interested applicants are encouraged to inquire at the City Hall. And any information the library may have held about what could be happening to her was now out of reach. She wasn't even sure where she would begin looking on her own. Every time I find some kind of help, it gets taken away, she thought, her shoulders drooping. Or I drive it away myself. What did I do to deserve this? She felt guilty for thinking of herself when Miss Dog-Ear was dead, but she felt utterly trapped and alone. Her shop had begun to feel like a prison, and now with the shadow of Miss Dog-Ear's death, it felt eerily like a tomb. I won't make this spring deadline. I'll be driven into debt for years to recover the cost of trying to start this business. I need mother and father's help, and then they'll be even in debt. The shop will be abandoned once more. Her tools will rust and freeze up, and her rich wall hangings would be left to rot, hidden away from the living eyes, while everything she had tried to accomplish shriveled away into nothing but dust and mold. Rarity blinked a few times at the beginnings of her tears, then glanced at the article again. One of the names had been familiar. She zeroed in on it and allowed one small bit of hope to return to her. There was still one pony that had been friendly to her, one pony she hadn't alienated or lost in some way. Minnie. It was a slim chance, but she had to do something. It was beginning to feel like the longer she worked and waited in her shop, the less likely she was about to come out again. I just can't wait inside anymore, hoping things will get better. Without pausing to find out any winter clothing, she opened the door and shut it behind herself without looking back. The air was frigid, as if she had jumped into a frozen lake. Her hooves started to hurt from the cold, almost as soon as she reached the main road, but she didn't want to even think about turning around and going back to the shop. Something was in there. She was almost sure of it, but she didn't have any way of doing it. Her only lay on the table on the other side of the marketplace. Still, the crisp air smelled delicious after being chopped up inside for so long, even if it had stung her nose. Ponies were already up and about. Rarity thought as seemed a little more subdued than usual. As she entered the market square, she realized most of them were talking about Miss Dog-Ear. Another wave of grief washed over her. Ponyville won't be the same again for a very long time. She began to shiver nonstop and her hooves had gone almost numb by the time she reached the center of the market. I wonder if it's possible to freeze to death before crossing town. Hot cider! A voice called above the gentle murmur of shoppers. Limited supplies, get your hot cider here. Special harvest-warming reserve, specially aged since the last harvest. Hot cider! Rarity turned away and saw Applejack at her stand, which had specially modified to serve the family's legendary winter version of their signature cider. She must have only just opened, as there were only a few ponies gravitating towards her. With the cold and all that happened, Rarity felt a special need for a hot treat. She approached the stand with a relieved smile, though her teeth were still clattering. There you go, Rose Luck, Applejack said, passing a thick wooden tankard over the counter. A white steam billowed from the light, foamy surface, and Rarity could smell cloves and cinnamon behind the bittersweet fragrance of the fermented apples. Don't drink it too fast this time, you hear? Hello, Applejack, Rarity said, putting as much cheeriness as she could into her shivering words. Applejack turned, but her friendly expression had vanished in an instant. Rarity recoiled from the sudden glare she had found directly at her. By her comparison, the air suddenly didn't seem half as cold. Rarity! Applejack's simple greeting carried an undercurrent of disgust. Is something wrong? Rarity asked, her temper flaring slightly against the cold and confusion. Wrong? Applejack said, an expression of an angry incredulity taking over her face. Then she turned away, inspecting various parts of her stand. This ain't the time or place for it, and it ain't any of your business anyhow. Best we just move along so we could both go about our day. Well, I was planning on buying some. Ain't interested in selling to you, Applejack said, cutting her off. She still wasn't looking at her. Rarity stared at her, indignation helping her anger to rise even further. Excuse me? You heard me. I ain't interested in dealing with some pony who's been going around spitting poison at everyone every chance she gets. The ponies in line behind Rarity shuffled away a bit, and she could hear the confused whispering. Her teeth stopped chattering as she clenched her jaw tight enough to hurt. She was cold, exhausted, and the last of her self-control had been left behind at her shop. Well, that's odd. I don't recall any dealings with the kind of backwater hay seeds you'd use to fraternizing with. The muscles in Applejack's neck tightened, but she gave no other sign she had heard. It ain't the dealing with some pony who's been hurting my friends. As simple as that. Rarity, just go find whatever you need elsewhere. Rarity felt a twinge of guilt and a fearful suspicion that Applejack knew somehow who had happened last night. Burying the idea, she drew her anger on instead of building into a boiled tide of rage. You know, this is precisely why I can't stand to deal with ponies around here. I can't imagine how any pony could have little sense to refuse service when she's already too poor to put a stitch of the proper clothing on her back. If that's what your sister has looked forward to, well, I pity her all the more. Applejack's head snapped up. Her eyes glistened like hard, fiery jades as they locked into Rarity's. As suddenly as a string had been cut, Rarity's anger vanished, only to be replaced by a cold dread. You got some real nerve, don't ya? Applejack said slowly. So that's how you look at me, at Pinkie Pie? Pinkie Pie, what are you talking about? Rarity asked. She tried to sound indignant, but Applejack was somehow pulling all the guilt that she had been feeling back to the surface. You know Pinkie Pie lost her job because of you, Applejack demanded. Rarity's eyes widened as a stone seemed to settle in her stomach. I don't care what went wrong with your business. That pony is a good mare, and sure she made an honest mistake, but she didn't deserve to be treated the way you treated her. She ain't got no family here, and that job was all she had to live on. Well, you didn't mean for that to happen? Well, you didn't think of that before you went and stomped all over her, did you? Applejack replied. But I saw you. You didn't even care. I still reckon you don't. From the moment I met you, I thought to myself, there's one of those prissy city pony types. You gotta watch yourself around one, AJ. But you seem nice enough, and I thought you might be able to bring some good business in town. I thought you might be different. But you had fooled me real good, didn't you, Rarity? Now, see here, Rarity said, finally summoning some energy to defend herself. Don't even try, Applejack cut her off, slamming a hoof onto the ground. See, even your little run-in with the poor Pinky might have been understandable, but how do you justify what you did to Fluttershy? Fluttershy? Rarity's voice was broken whisper. What remained of her indication vanished in an instant. Applejack's glare was fit to cow a hydra. Oh yeah, I talked to her the other day. I don't think I've ever seen that pony so upset. She said all she tried to do was cheer you up, and then you ran out of her like a rat. What do you have to say about that? Who in the hay does even something like this? Rarity could hear the whispering from the ponies around her, turning angrily. That's not what... That ain't what happened? Wait, what? So Fluttershy's a liar now? Is that it, Rarity? You listen to me, Applejack continued, her voice going quiet and deadly. Your family's done well enough by every pony as long as you have lived here. But whatever you picked up from the fancy schools and big cities you went off to, it ain't welcome in this town. Around here, we don't take kindly to ponies who treat others like they're garbage. As long as you're doing business that way, you ain't welcome here either. The whispers were louder now, voicing obnoxious agreement. I don't want to hear it, Applejack said. As a matter of fact, I don't ever want to see your face around my stall again, and if I hear you about mistreating my friends again... She drew a long breath, looking at Rarity, as if she could barely stand to be near her. Well, I hope I don't. Now get out of here. Rarity took a hesitant step back, acutely aware of the many ponies standing around, muttering and glaring at her. Go on, get! Rarity turned and ran, dodging between the bodies surrounding her, half expectantly some pony to punch or trip her, but no pony stopped her. She found herself alone now, freezing at the muddy far edge of the market. She turned at a narrow lane and slumped against the wall. Only the shortness of her breath kept her from breaking into tears. The worst of it was that she felt deserved every single cutting word Applejack had thrown at her. She had tried not to think about Pinky or Fluttershy, but now she could hear the words that she had just yelled at both of them, echoing in ears as if they have just shouted at them. She wanted to go home and hide forever in the dark shop. She wanted to never have any of those to say faces again. But going home meant seeing all those covered mirrors, feeling the strange, angry watchfulness that filled the place like poisonous fumes, even cowering the mud before Applejack. Rarity still hadn't been afraid, as she was dark malevolent that seemed to bore into her from behind every moment she was in the shop. Besides, she realized, I have to cross the market again to get back. It's not going to be safe going through for a while, and I'll just freeze before I make it back if I go around. She was already fairly close to Minnie's office, so she decided she might as well try to do what she was set out to do. She emerged back into the side road and looked around with her ears back and her head down low. She half expected to see ponies all around her, glaring and whispering to each other, but seemed to have left the angry faces behind. Those few she saw barely give her a glance before continuing on her way. Still, she felt anxious and shrank back from anyone who drew the cloak too close. She made her slow way like that all the way to Minnie's office. The open sign hanging from the window was the first bit of good news that she had gotten all day. She pushed the door open and practically fell inside, her eyes watering and skin crawling for a moment later, as if the intense heat washed over her. She had forgotten how thinkably hot Minnie kept her office. After being out in the cold for long, Rarity almost felt like she was being burned. At the other end of the room, Minimum Mortgage herself sat behind the reception desk, squinting at several brown folders she held in front of her face. Her jaw dropped as she looked up and saw Rarity, dripping and muddy in the open doorway. My goodness, Rarity, she said, dropping the folders and trotting out from behind the desk. You look like you caught in the stampede. Are you all right? I'm fine, Minnie, Rarity managed, trying feebly to wipe her stinging hooves on the mat. Though you're not far off with that guess. There is the washroom just down the hall. Please come and let's get you taken care of. Minnie fussed, pulling Rarity into the room. Rarity protested, seeing the drops and specks of mud that she was leaving behind, but Minnie shushed her firmly and dragged her down the hall. Whatever you're thinking, coming out here dressed in, well, nothing at all. Here's some clean towels and water. Get yourself cleaned up now, and then we'll talk. Oh, don't fuss all about the towels, dear. That's what they're for. She bustled off, saying something about a hot drink, once Rarity was ready. Rarity stood there for a moment looking at the clear water, rippling ever so slightly in the soothed porcelain sinks and white fluffy towels folded beside them. She almost broke down crying all over again. She couldn't remember the last time she had appreciated something so simplistically nice and clear water, so thick the towels so much. She took longer than she meant to, having been unable to resist running the clean, stiff bristled brushes on the counter through her mane, tail, and coat. As she emerged, she felt better if she had gotten the deluxe treatment at a spa. Minnie was waiting for her in the front room, steaming cups of the table beside the snapping fireplace. Rarity sat down next to her and thanked her before picking up the heavy, hot mug with her tired hooves and hot cocoa. Feeling better? Minnie asked, picking her up her own cup. Very much. Rarity took a sip. I can't really thank you enough for all you've done. Oh, tish tosh, Minnie said, boiling her cocoa. It's nothing at all. For a moment they sat in silence. Rarity focused on the drink before her, on the heat of the fire. It felt pleasant welcoming her for the first time. Then Minnie continued. If you're here about Pinkie Pie, you might be pleased to hear that she's no longer employed here. Rarity's brief happiness vanished, and no cocoa or fire could heat show the cold shame that she felt inside. Minnie, about that, I was having a bad day and there was just an honest mistake, she said, hearing the echo of Applejack's accusations. I don't want her fired. I really preferred to hear that you brought her back on. Well, that's kind of you, my dear, but I'm afraid it's not possible anymore, Minnie replied. As a matter of fact, I didn't fire her. She resigned and she didn't felt like she'd failed our most important client, and she couldn't be trusted to carry out the business here anymore. Minnie grimaced a little as she took another sip. I told her she was being foolish, but she was quite insisted. Rarity winced at her regret intensifying. I shouldn't have said those things to her. I was wrong. Do you know where she is? I'd like to apologize and maybe convince her to come back. I know what her work meant to you. What's the problem, dear? She's gone home. Home, you mean? With her friends in town? No, back to the family. They had a farm in the down south, I believe. She said it was time she paid them a visit. With all this what happened. I see. Do you even know when she'll be coming back? She didn't say, Minnie said sadly. I'm a little worried she may not come back at all. But that's not your fault, dear. It's up to her where she goes and what she does from there. As for me, she paused and looked at the cabinets of files, which had become noticeably more disheveled since Rarity's last visit. Well, I'll carry on. I'm sure I can find some more help soon. Now, enough about that. She put her down her cup and looked at Rarity through her thin, octagonal glasses. What brings you here today? Is everything all right with the property? Oh, it's fine, Rarity said, trying to smile, but her lips trembled as the feeling stirred. She broke off, then hid behind her cup. The warm, thick, sweet cocoa filled her mouth. It reminded her of the cocoa in the library, the cocoa that Miss Dog-Ear had always kept ready and warmed over the years of patrons who braved the weather to cross town to find a new book to pass the cold weeks of winter. Thinking of the librarian and her sudden death pushed a Rarity over the edge. A cruel heat rose in her throat and stinging wetness that clouded the edges of her eyes. She choked trying to hold back a sob, but then it broke free anyway and she looked down, closing her eyes tight against the silent tears shaking her frame. She felt warm, four-legged wrap around her shoulder. She wanted to run away, but to keep her from being seen at such a state. Well, then she heard Minnie's calm, voice. It's okay, dear, she said gently, pulling Rarity a little closer. Just let it out. Rarity broke down. For a moment, all she could hear were her loud, escaping sobs. There, a soft, thin handkerchief was pressed onto her hoof. She accepted gratefully, with all the weight of everything that had gone so wrong pounding through her as she just sat there and cried. Finally, she managed to rein it in, and the tears had subsided as she took a long, controlled breaths. I'm so sorry. Her voice was weak and rasping. I can't imagine what you must think of me, coming here like this and putting on such a display. Nonsense, Minnie said, smiling gently. We all need a chance to have a good cry sometimes. I expect you've been putting a lot onto yourself and bottling it all up. Maybe, Rarity returned the smile. I did hear about what happened with the Historical Society, Minnie said carefully. Is that what's been troubling you? It's certainly a huge part of it. It's just everything's been going so wrong. I haven't been able to get the shop lit properly. My designs have been turning out wrong, and I've been taking things out on my friends, and she looked down at the remains of her cocoa. And now Miss Dog-Ear is gone. I just don't know how much more I can take. Minnie looked away sadly at the mention of Dog-Ear. It's too true. I think we are all gonna miss her terribly. Ponyville wouldn't be here without a good folk like that. She turned her back at Rarity. But don't you worry, dear. Whatever's gone wrong with you and your friends, I'm sure they'll understand if you let them know how things have been for you. I doubt that, Rarity hiccuped. I've really made a royal mess of things. They're still your friends, Minnie said firmly. It might be painful for you, but you can still make things right. And even if you can't fix everything, you'll come a long way better than having that tired, but I think you might be surprised what that true, honest apology can do. Maybe, Rarity conceded, though she was unconvinced. And as for the historical grant, Minnie continued, straightening up and pushing her glasses up to her muzzle, I feel practically responsible for how that turned out for you. I'll tell you what at that. You let me do some digging, and we'll see if we can try to find some other avenues of scaring up that money. I don't know if I want to try any more tricks. They haven't exactly turned out well for me. Never underestimate the good value of the real estate agent on your side. Minnie reassured her with confidently. I've got some favors owed to me here and there. If I can get this straightened out, I'll eat my roof, which would be a really shame because I had it rehatched. Rarity couldn't help but laugh. I suppose that can't hurt. Don't try and take everything alone, Minnie told her, putting a hoof on top of Rarity's own. You've got friends and family all around you. In a town like this, where all each other has, at least we can do is look out for another. Rarity bit her lip, feeling the thread of tears returning to her eyes. She swallowed and blinked hard, nodding. They returned to a comfortable silence as Rarity finished her cocoa. She looked at the dark stains of the bottom of the mug and cleared her throat before looking up at Minnie. I did come here with a favor to ask, she said, and Minnie looked up again quizzically. Before she passed away, Miss Dog-Ear was helping me with some research. I feel terrible to ask this, but I really must continue, if I can. I was hoping... Minnie leaned back, a skeptical frown on her face. I do have access to the library while it's unoccupied, yes, she said carefully, but I can't just let any pony in there while there's no staff in it. I can't tell you how many regulations that would be breaking. Please, I don't want to take anything out. I just need to get through some things, Rarity pleaded, although she was unsure how it would even gain her anything. Isn't there a way I can get access soon? Celestia knows how long it would take for him to hire some pony to work there. Minnie pierced her lips and sighed through her nose, looking away and fidgeting uncomfortably. She tapped her hoof a few times against a chair, then shook her head. I still have some things to look over there myself, she conceded. Her effects will be evaluated by her solicitors, but I will have to go through my documentation regarding the facility, and the property itself needs assessing. I suppose I can allow you to accompany me while I'm working there. Rarity smiled widely, jumping up and grasping Minnie's hoof with both of her own. Oh, thank you, You don't know how much this means to me." Minnie just shook her head and stood up. "Perks of a tiny town. Just don't get anything out of order. The last thing we need is dog-ear coming after us from beyond the grave." Before leaving, Minnie forced Rarity to accept a heavy coat and spare boots. Though they didn't fit very well, they made the journey across town far more bearable than Rarity's first trek had been. Minnie let them into the library and locked them both inside, where they doffed the protective gear respectively by the doorstep. The interior was dark, cold and dark, and most of the curtains had been drawn over the windows. It reminded Rarity disturbingly of her shop. After waiting another warning not to mess with things too much, Minnie had left Rarity and gone upstairs to the library's living quarters. Rarity shivered to think of it. She did not want to envy her friend with the task of working in a room with the empty bed that had recently been occupied by the still cold remains of one Ponyville's best citizens. She walked back slowly around the library, feeling oddly like a trespasser as she looked over the dark shelves. It had always been quiet in the library, but it always had a warm silence, the kind where you always knew Miss Dog-Ear was somewhere near close by, and the only unexpected voices were those books one opened on a lazy afternoon. Now even the books seemed to have fallen quieter than usual, as if some life had gone out with them with the passing of their own librarian. Rarity passed by the beverage cart, its abandoned containers full of cold and stale liquid. It just made her sad just to look at it. She glanced at the mirror hanging above it, and it was surprised to notice a small crack in the lower left corner, wandering black line running from the side to the bottom edge of its clean glass. "That's odd. I don't remember that being here." She turned away, her mild puzzlement fading as she walked over to the desk. It was remarkably tidy. Rarity supposed that Miss Dog-Ear had put everything into its proper place before going to bed for the last time. There was a tray of small loose papers, the topmost which was complicated order from some sort. A box sitting on the floor by the chair had been opened, and Rarity saw with a pain that it was empty except for 7 fashion catalogs from various companies across Equestria. Miss Dog-Ear had set them aside for Rarity when she just came in, like always. Rarity wished that she could take them, but she would have to arrange something later. She was about to turn away when she noticed a thick brown envelope lying on the side of the desk's most empty surface. As she looked closer, she was surprised to recognize it was one of the microfilm cheese envelopes from the basement. Rarity bent closer curiously, recalling that Miss Dog-Ear had carried one of them out of the basement that day. She had researched the history of the old town hall. Ponyville Express, September CE 966, she read. Why did she bring this out here? The last issues I saw before the gallery closed were from August that year. She puzzled and lifted, and spotted 2 other items beneath it. One was a battered envelope with a torn opening along a top, addressed to Miss Dog-Ear in chicken scratch of hoof writing that was painful to look at. The other was another old photograph in the badly faded monochrome. It showed 2 ponies standing outside with what looked like the old town hall. A sign was hanging above the door with the words Rula Gallery, painted in long flowering letters. One of the ponies, an earth pony, was a thick, blushy locks of hair, was smiling and nuzzling into the neck of the other. A Pegasus who was laughing and hugging for the first with one foreleg. The Pegasus had a rhodiest, unruly mane, and one of her ears was bent forward as she laughed with her friend. "Miss Dog-Ear?" Rarity said out loud incredulously. She bent closer to try to see the other mare, but the only thing that she could make out clearly was she probably had a mane and tail with several different colors, if the faded tones of the photo were anything to go by. Rarity carefully carried everything over to one of the reading chairs and sat down. She laid the picture aside and picked up the archival envelope. Inside she found a standard monochrome film with the piece of the newspaper that had been carefully preserved and laminated. It was one from an issue dated September 19th, 966. As a very short, informative piece, Rarity blinked at the headline in confusion. "You said she left and closed up shop," Rarity said, bending closer to make out the old print. "Tula Rula, the owner of the local art gallery, was found dead yesterday morning. Cause of death was to rule by gas poisoning, and the incident has been treated as a death. It's a miracle the whole place didn't go up, Ponyville Fire Chief 4 Alarm said in a statement. She opened up every blast gas in the valve in the house. Even the tiniest spark could have taken out the Salvern district. The fate of the property and the funeral arrangements remain undecided, pending notification for any kin. Rarity let the paper down, aghast at what she had read. Why would you lie to me? She thought, remembering the librarian carrying the folder with the final article about the homes passed out of sight. Why would you hide this? And why didn't you tell me you knew her? She looked at the photo again. She couldn't imagine two ponies looking happier. She turned it over and saw something written in fade purple ink on the back. June 7th, 964. 2 years before Tularula would kill herself in the gallery. What in the hay happened? Rarity asked. Unfortunately, the man who could tell her had finally followed the friend in death. She turned the envelope and pulled a single sheet of paper from it. The same crude writing covered the top portion, and she had to squint until the tip paper to make out certain words. Miss Dog-Ear, Golden Oaks Library, 41114, Flanagan Lane, Ponyville. Dear Miss Dog-Ear, I'm not sure I understood your questions regarding the old gallery. Sure, I took care of it for the town, but so far as I know, we never had any break-ins or vandalism. I definitely haven't seen any pony wandering around inside or anything like that. I do know there are rumors like that didn't like working on it because the strange things kept happening. But that's just what ponies wagging their tongues. The only truth behind that talk is I always feel darn uneasy whenever I was around it. Always felt like some pony in it was watching me, you know. Ain't nothing more than an old empty building though, and I'm just glad it's some pony else's problem now. I wish them well. If you have any sensible questions about it, we could talk when I get back from visiting the folks up in Canterlot. Otherwise, I hope you're having a great day. Sincerely, Hayseed Turnip Truck. P.S. If your questions are related to those rumors, I appreciate if you could quell a few. Ponies have already think I'm a tad flighty from what I have said about that place. Frankly, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were taking them too seriously. Rarity turned the envelope over, and it was postmarked 4 days ago, after Rarity had visit. Dog-Ear had contacted the pony who worked in the gallery for years, and asked if he had ever seen anything strange. The confidence was something Rarity was not willing to ignore anymore. Miss Dog-Ear, did you know something? How's it going down there, Rarity? Minnie called down, stepping up to the stairs. Oh, I'm just fine, Rarity called back, startled. I found a little of what I was looking for already. You aren't ready to leave, are you? Minnie shook her head. No, I just needed to check in every now and then. I'll probably be a few more hours with all what's left here. Give a holler if you need anything, all right? Of course, Rarity said, and Minnie vanished back to the upper bedroom. Rarity looked back down at the few documents she had found, frowning in a fearful puzzlement. Dog-Ear had known Tularula quite well by the looks of it, but she had completely failed to mention it when Rarity had came specifically asking about the gallery's past. She had even lied when said Tularula had left Ponyville. Perhaps the subject was simply too painful to discuss. Looking at the photograph, Rarity could understand that if it was the case, but when she had claimed Tularula's art was worthless. There was still so many unanswered questions. Rarity stood and returned the paper letter and the photograph to the desk, then began her search for the bookshelves for anything that might help her understand what was happening in her home. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.